You wake up, it's your birthday, the notifications start flooding in, messages from people who haven't spoken to you in months, automated greetings from companies that want your money. Everyone suddenly remembers you exist, and yet something inside you feels hollow, empty, like you're watching a performance where you're both the actor and the audience, and neither role feels authentic anymore. Some people go silent on their birthday because they've seen through something the rest of the world still clings to desperately. They've outgrown the illusion of celebration, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. This isn't about being cynical. This isn't about rejecting joy. This is about something far more profound, something that philosophy has been whispering to us for thousands of years. Something about the nature of pleasure itself and why we've been chasing the wrong kind all along. Let's start with a question that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you truly celebrated yourself? Not performed celebration, not posted about it, not gathered people around you to validate your existence for 24 hours, but actually sat with yourself and felt genuine satisfaction with who you are and what you've become. Most people can't answer that question because most people have never done it. We've been taught that celebration is external, that joy requires witnesses, that your worth increases with the number of people who acknowledge your existence on one arbitrary day of the year. But here's the thing about illusions. They work beautifully until they don't. And for some people, birthdays become the moment when the illusion cracks wide open. The ancient Greeks had two words for pleasure: hedon and eudaimonia. Hedon was the immediate sensory pleasure. The cake, the party, the attention, the dopamine hit of being the center of something for a moment. Eudaimonia was something else entirely. It was the deep satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with your true nature. The quiet contentment of becoming who you actually are, not who others expect you to be. Most birthday celebrations are pure hedony. They're designed to give you a spike, a momentary high. And like all spikes, they're followed by a crash. You wake up the day after your birthday, and the silence is deafening. All those people who loved you yesterday, gone, back to their own lives. The validation you felt, evaporated. You're left with yourself again. And if you haven't cultivated eudaimonia, if you haven't built something real inside, that silence feels like death. Epicurus, the philosopher most associated with hedonism, never advocated for wild parties and excessive celebration. In fact, he lived simply, quietly. He understood that the highest pleasure comes not from accumulation or attention, but from the absence of pain and the presence of tranquility. He called it ataraxia, untroubled existence. And he knew that most of what we call pleasure is actually just the temporary relief from the pain of wanting. Think about that. The birthday celebration isn't pleasure, it's relief. Relief from the fear of being forgotten. Relief from the terror of insignificance. Relief from the nagging question that keeps you up at night: do I matter? And so we construct this elaborate ritual where, for one day, other people tell us we matter. We outsource our sense of worth to whoever shows up, whoever remembers, whoever makes the effort. And every year, we're disappointed. Because it's never enough. It can never be enough. Because the hole we're trying to fill isn't shaped like external validation. Some people go silent on their birthday because they've realized they were celebrating the wrong thing. They were celebrating being alive for another year without ever asking if they were actually living. They were marking time without examining what they did with that time. They were aging without evolving. And there's something profoundly sad about celebrating survival when you haven't yet figured out what you're surviving for. This is where the philosophy of hedonism becomes radical. Not hedonism as the world understands it, all excess and indulgence, but hedonism as the Greeks meant it, the pursuit of genuine pleasure through wisdom, friendship, and self-knowledge. The hedonist doesn't reject celebration. The hedonist rejects false celebration. Empty ritual, performative joy. The hedonist asks, what actually brings me deep, lasting satisfaction? And often, the answer isn't a party. And if you've been resonating with this, maybe it's time to join the space where we go deeper every week. You know where the button is? Let's talk about what happens when you stop celebrating your birthday the traditional way. First, people think you're depressed. They worry about you. They try to force celebration on you because your silence makes them uncomfortable. And that discomfort tells you everything you need to know. When someone's peace disturbs you, it's because you haven't found your own. When someone's solitude threatens you, it's because you're terrified of yours. The person who goes silent on their birthday isn't rejecting connection. They're rejecting the commodification of connection. They're saying no to the transaction where attention is currency and celebration is performance. They're choosing something else, something quieter, something real. Nietzsche wrote about the eternal recurrence. The idea that you might have to live this exact life again and again, infinitely, every moment, every choice, every birthday. He posed it as a test. Would you want to live this life again? If the answer is no, you're not living correctly. You're going through motions, following scripts, celebrating because you're supposed to, not because there's anything worth celebrating. The person who goes silent on their birthday might be the only one taking Nietzsche's test seriously. They're asking themselves, is this life worth repeating? Is this version of me worth becoming again? And if the answer is no, why would I celebrate? Why would I pretend? Why would I gather people around me to validate a life I don't even want? This is uncomfortable territory. We're taught that birthdays are sacred, that you must celebrate, that refusing to do so is somehow wrong, ungrateful, even pathological. But maybe the pathology is on the other side. Maybe the pathology is in the desperate need to be celebrated. Maybe the pathology is in the inability to sit with yourself without needing others to confirm your worth sitting with. Maybe the pathology is in building your entire sense of self on whether people remember to text you on one specific day. The philosopher Schopenhauer said that wealth is like seawater. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. The same is true of external validation. The more you need it, the more you'll need it. The bigger the celebration, the bigger the void when it ends. You don't solve that problem by making the celebration bigger. You solve it by addressing the void. So what does the hedonist do instead? The true hedonist, the one who understands that pleasure isn't about spikes, but about baseline, doesn't reject the birthday. They transform it. They use it as a moment of genuine reflection, not performance, reflection. They ask themselves difficult questions. Who did I become this year? What did I learn? What did I let go of? What am I still carrying that I should have buried months ago? They sit with the discomfort of honest self-assessment. They don't need a party to distract them from the answers. They don't need noise to drown out the truth. They sit in silence because silence is where real transformation happens. And maybe, if they've done the work, if they've lived in a way that aligns with their values, they feel something that no birthday party could ever provide. They feel satisfaction, not the hedon of cake and candles, but the eudaimonia of becoming. Here's what most people don't understand about pleasure. Real pleasure doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't require documentation. Real pleasure is the quiet contentment of knowing you're living correctly. It's the absence of regret, the absence of pretense, the absence of the need to prove anything to anyone. Epicurus built his entire philosophy around this. He lived in a garden with close friends, they ate simple food, they talked about ideas, they cultivated ataraxia, and they were happier than kings, because they understood that pleasure isn't found in accumulation, it's found in elimination. You don't need more celebration, you need fewer false ones. You don't need more attention, you need better attention, from people who actually see you. You don't need a bigger party, you need a deeper life. And if that's landing differently than you expected, maybe there's more to explore here. Maybe this is just the beginning of something. When you go silent on your birthday, you're conducting an experiment. You're testing whether your relationships are real or transactional. You're discovering who reaches out because they care, and who reaches out because the algorithm reminded them. You're learning who respects your boundaries and who violates them with forced cheerfulness and guilt trips about not celebrating. And the results of that experiment can be brutal. You might discover that most of your relationships are shallow, that most people in your life don't actually know you, that the community you thought you had was really just a collection of acquaintances who show up for rituals but not for reality. But here's the paradox. That brutal discovery is a gift. Because once you know the truth, you can build something real. You can stop investing in people who don't invest in you. You can stop performing for an audience that isn't even watching. You can start creating the kind of life that doesn't need external validation to feel meaningful. The Stoics had a practice called negative visualization. They would imagine losing everything they had, their possessions, their status, their relationships, not to be pessimistic, but to appreciate what they had while they had it, and to prepare themselves for the inevitability of loss. What if we applied that to birthdays? What if, instead of demanding celebration, we sat with the reality that another year has passed, that we're closer to death? That time is the one resource we can never get back. What if we used our birthday not as a moment of self-congratulation, but as a memento mori, a reminder of mortality? Would that be depressing? Or would that be honest? Would that rob us of joy? Or would that force us to ask what joy actually means? The person who goes silent on their birthday might be the only one being honest about what a birthday really is. It's not a celebration, it's a measurement. One more year consumed, one less year remaining. What did you do with it? Most people can't handle that question, so they throw a party. They invite people over. They drink and laugh and post photos and pretend that the passage of time is something to celebrate rather than something to reckon with. But the hedonist doesn't run from reality. The hedonist faces it, and in facing it, finds a pleasure that's deeper than any party could provide. The pleasure of living consciously, of choosing deliberately, of building a life that doesn't need to be celebrated because it's already satisfying. This doesn't mean you never celebrate. It means you only celebrate what's real. You don't celebrate surviving, you celebrate becoming. You don't celebrate being remembered, you celebrate being known. You don't celebrate the attention of many, you celebrate the presence of few. There's a concept in Buddhism called upasha equanimity, the ability to remain balanced regardless of external circumstances. To not be lifted by praise or crushed by criticism, to find your center and stay there. The person who goes silent on their birthday is practicing upeksha. They're saying, my worth isn't determined by whether you acknowledge me. My value isn't contingent on your participation in my ritual. I am whole without your validation. I am complete without your attention. I am enough as I am. That's not arrogance. That's liberation. And it's terrifying to people who haven't found it yet. Because if you can be happy without their recognition, what power do they have over you? If you don't need their approval, what can they use to control you? Your silence becomes a mirror, and they don't like what they see. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of celebration and why it fails us. Celebration, in its modern form, is about broadcasting. You don't just have a birthday. You announce it. You update your status. You post photos. You create evidence that something special happened. But why? Why do we need evidence? Because without evidence, did it happen? And that's the trap. We've become so obsessed with documenting moments that we've stopped living them. We've replaced experience with performance. We've replaced presence with proof. The birthday party becomes a photo shoot. The celebration becomes content. And you, the person supposedly being celebrated, become a prop in your own life. You're not experiencing your birthday, you're producing it. And production isn't pleasure. Production is labor. You're working on your birthday, working to maintain an image, working to meet expectations, working to prove to an audience of strangers and acquaintances that you're living a life worth celebrating. But are you? Or are you just really good at pretending? And if this is stirring something in you, something that's been waiting to be acknowledged, there's a community here that goes beyond surface level. Consider joining us. The hedonist philosopher would ask you to conduct a thought experiment. Imagine your next birthday. Imagine you told no one. You didn't update your status. You didn't wait for messages. You didn't expect anything from anyone. You simply woke up, acknowledged another year of existence, and spent the day exactly as you wanted. Maybe you'd go for a long walk. Maybe you'd read a book that's been sitting on your shelf for months. Maybe you'd cook yourself a meal you actually enjoy. Not something Instagram-worthy, just something that tastes good to you. Maybe you'd call one person who actually knows you and have a real conversation. Maybe you'd sit in silence and just think, just be. No performance, no pressure. No disappointment when the celebration doesn't meet your expectations because you had no expectations. Just you, acknowledging yourself by yourself. How does that feel? Sad or honest? Lonely or peaceful? Depressing or liberating? Your answer reveals everything about your relationship with yourself. Because here's the truth, if being alone on your birthday feels like punishment, you don't have a celebration problem, you have a self problem. You haven't built a relationship with yourself that's worth celebrating. You haven't created an internal world that's interesting enough to inhabit. You've outsourced your sense of worth so completely that without external input, you feel like nothing. And that's not a birthday problem, that's a life problem. The Stoics would say you've made yourself a slave. You've handed your peace over to forces beyond your control. You've said my happiness depends on whether other people remember me, acknowledge me, celebrate me. And now you're trapped, waiting, hoping, disappointed. Repeat, year after year. The same cycle, the same hollow feeling, the same recognition that something is wrong, but you can't quite name it. Until one year, you do. You name it, it's the celebration itself. It's fake. Epicurus made a distinction between natural and necessary desires. Natural but unnecessary desires, and unnatural and unnecessary desires. Food when you're hungry, natural and necessary. Gourmet food when you're not hungry, natural but unnecessary. A golden statue in your honor, unnatural and unnecessary. Where does a birthday celebration fall? For most people, it's become unnatural and unnecessary. It's not about acknowledging your life, it's about maintaining social status. It's not about gratitude for another year, it's about fear of being forgotten. It's not about connection, it's about collection. Collecting messages, collecting likes, but you can't collect your way to mattering. You matter or you don't, and that's determined by how you live, not by how many people show up to your party. So, what's the alternative? What does a birthday look like when you've seen through the illusion? It looks like honesty. It looks like you assessing your life without the noise of other people's opinions. It looks like you asking hard questions. Did I grow this year? Did I become more of who I actually am, or more of who I thought I should be? Did I make choices I'm proud of? Did I let go of things I needed to release? Did I build something real? Did I deepen my relationships, or just maintain them? Did I learn something that changed me? Did I face fears? Did I choose courage over comfort? These questions don't have easy answers. They require reflection, they require honesty. They require the kind of silence that most people avoid, because silence forces you to confront what you've been running from. But the hedonist doesn't run. The hedonist turns toward reality because reality is where genuine pleasure lives. There's a Zen teaching about the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering is what we add to pain through our resistance, our stories, our refusal to accept what is. The same applies to birthdays. Aging is inevitable. The suffering around birthdays, that's optional. That's what we add through our need for validation, our fear of insignificance, our attachment to rituals that no longer serve us. When you go silent on your birthday, you're removing the suffering. You're not removing the acknowledgement of time passing. You're removing the performance anxiety, the social pressure, the comparison, the disappointment. You're left with just the fact, another year, what now? And in that simplicity, there's freedom, there's space, there's possibility. You're no longer trapped in someone else's script for how this day should go. You're writing your own, and maybe your script is quiet. Maybe it's simple, maybe it's nothing. And maybe that's perfect. Let me tell you what happens after you go silent on your birthday for the first time. Some people get angry. They take your silence personally. They accuse you of being difficult, antisocial, depressed. They need you to celebrate because your celebration validates their celebration. If you opt out, you're threatening the entire system. You're saying the emperor has no clothes. You're revealing that maybe we're all just going through motions, and none of it means what we pretend it means. Other people respect it. They might not understand it, but they respect it. They give you space. They let you be. And those are the people worth keeping. The ones who can allow you to exist outside their expectations, the ones who don't need you to perform to justify their presence in your life. After the first silent birthday, you realize something profound. The world didn't end. You didn't cease to exist. Your worth didn't diminish. If anything, it increased. Because you proved to yourself that you don't need external validation to feel whole. You found something that most people spend their entire lives searching for. You found yourself, not the performed version, not the social media version, not the version that shows up to meet expectations, the real version, the one that exists in silence, the one that doesn't need witnesses. If you're still here, still following this thread, maybe there's a reason. Maybe you're ready to question what you've been accepting without thought. There's more where this came from. The philosopher Seneca wrote about the poverty of busyness. He said, "We're not given a short life. We make it short through waste. We waste time on things that don't matter. We waste energy on people who don't care. We waste attention on performances that don't fulfill us." Your birthday is a microcosm of your life. If your birthday is full of empty ritual, what does that say about your year? If your celebration is all performance, what does that say about how you're living? The person who goes silent on their birthday isn't giving up on joy. They're refusing counterfeit joy. They're saying, "I want the real thing, and I'm willing to wait for it, work for it, become worthy of it," because real joy doesn't come from parties. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, when your relationships reflect your truth, when your days accumulate into a life that you don't need to escape from, or distract yourself from, or celebrate to convince yourself is worth living, you just live it, and the living itself is enough. This brings us to the heart of hedonism as a philosophy. It's not about maximizing pleasure in the moment, it's about constructing a life where pleasure is the natural byproduct of how you live, where you don't need special days because your regular days are already good, where you don't need validation because you're valid, where you don't need celebration because you're already celebrating, quietly, constantly, in the way you move through the world. Epicurus said the greatest fruit of self-sufficiency is freedom. When you don't need the birthday celebration, you're free. Free from expectation, free from disappointment, free from the tyranny of other people's attention. You own your own day, you own your own year, you own your own life. And once you taste that freedom, you can never go back to the cage, no matter how decorated it is. Here's what they don't tell you about growing older. At some point, birthdays stop being about celebration and start being about reckoning. You can't ignore the accumulation anymore. The choices you made, the time you wasted, the person you became or failed to become. And that reckoning is uncomfortable. So we cover it with cake and candles and forced cheerfulness. We distract ourselves from the question we should be asking. Was it worth it? Not just the year, the whole thing, your whole life so far. Was it worth the time you spent? Would you do it again? The eternal recurrence. And if the answer is no, what are you going to do about it? Because you can't get the years back. You can only change what you do with what remains. And that starts with honesty. It starts with stopping the performance. It starts with silence. The silence where you finally hear yourself, where you finally ask what you actually want instead of what you're supposed to want, where you finally choose what brings you real pleasure instead of what brings you temporary relief from the pain of wanting. There's a concept in existentialism called bad faith. It's when you lie to yourself about your freedom, when you pretend you don't have choices, when you say, "I have to celebrate my birthday because that's what people do," but you don't have to. You never had to. You chose to, and you can choose differently. The person in bad faith lives in reaction. They do what's expected, they follow the script, they never ask why. The person in good faith lives in creation. They choose deliberately. They write their own script. They know that every tradition is just someone else's choice that got repeated enough times to feel mandatory. But nothing is mandatory. You can create new rituals. Or you can create no rituals. You can celebrate in silence. You can mark the day by unmarking it. You can let it pass like any other day, because ultimately, that's what it is, just another day. Unless you make it something else, and if you make it something else, make it something real. Make it something that serves your actual growth, not just your social image. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh taught about the concept of interbeing, the idea that nothing exists in isolation. Everything is connected. Your birthday isn't just your birthday.